Yeah, good afternoon, Minmoy. Good afternoon, all the other students. So we will start with the development of CNS. All of you, welcome to my class. So we are going to do the development of CNS. So all of you know that when you talk about central nervous system, what constitutes the central nervous system? As you can see from the slide in the bracket already I've mentioned. So it is your brain and spinal cord. All of you know that. So brain and spinal cord, okay, they constitute the CNS. I hope it is clear. Okay. So brain and spinal cord constitutes the CNS. What will constitute the PNS or the peripheral nervous system? Anyone from the class of 2019? What constitutes the peripheral nervous system? Anything, any nervous tissue which lies outside, okay, which lies outside the CNS. Or in other words, any nervous tissue which lies outside the brain and the spinal cord. Are you clear? So for example, in the head region, you have the pair of cranial nerves. How many pairs of cranial nerves you have? 12 pairs. So in the head region, you know that you have 12 pairs of cranial nerves, okay? And you also have in the vertebral region, you have how many pairs of spinal nerves you'll have? 31? Very good. So you'll have 31 pairs of spinal nerves, okay? And besides this, you also have the autonomic nervous system, that is the sympathetic ganglia system, okay? And the other autonomic ganglia which are present, they're present all over your viscera, inside your body, right? So they will constitute the peripheral nervous system. I hope this is clear, okay? So when you talk of CNS, basically you're talking only the components of CNS, that is the development of brain and spinal cord. Okay. Now, how does the CNS develop? Which germinal layer? So you know that you have three germinal layers which are formed at the end of gastrulation. All of you know gastrulation. So gastrulation is a process by which all the three germ layers are developed in the third week of intrauterine life, right? Okay, so you have the three germ layers. I hope you have the three germ layers. You have the ectodermal germ layer, okay, then you have the mesoderm, and you have the endoderm, right? So out of these three germ layers, you'll see that your central nervous system develops from ectoderm. Keep that in mind, okay? It develops from which germinal layer? Ectoderm, okay? Now, you have to be more precise, okay? Now, when you mention ectoderm, okay, you'll see that again during the third week of development, okay, towards the middle and the late or the end of the third week of development, you'll see that the part of the ectoderm which lies over the notochord, okay, that midline portion, the midline portion of the ectoderm which lies over the notochord, it thickens, right? It thickens to form the neural plate, right? Okay, so the cells of the neural plate form the neuroectoderm, okay? So let us be more precise. So you'll say that the CNS develops from neuroectoderm, okay? And your neuroectoderm is nothing but in turn derived from ectoderm. Clear? From which germinal layer? From ectoderm. And what is neuroectoderm? So neuroectoderm are the cells, the epithelial cells of the neural plate. Okay, so you know what is neurulation? All of you have been taught neurulation already in the general embryology. So you know that neurulation is a process, okay? This is the process by which the neural plate gets converted into neural tube. That is a simple definition, okay? And it starts in the third week of development, okay? So what happens is that you'll see that the midline portion, I'm repeating again, the midline portion of the ectoderm which lies over the notochord, okay, it thickens, that means it proliferates, okay, to form the neural plate, right? Okay, so I hope this is clear. So you'll say that the development of CNS, it starts from the third week of intrauterine life, right? So here it will become more clearer here. So you just have a look at this slide, okay? So you come to the image in slide A, where the embryo is 18 days old, right? So here you will see that the midline portion of the ectoderm which lies over the notochord, okay, it will thicken and it will form a plate which is known as neural plate, which is highlighted in red color, right? Now this neural plate, okay, the cells of the neural plate are known as neuroectoderm. So that's why you'll see that the arrow has been pointed over the neural plate, which is marked with neuroectoderm, right? Okay. Now, if you see the shape of the germinal disc, so this is the dorsal view of the embryo. So what view of the embryo is this? This is dorsal view of the embryo. That means you're seeing the embryo from the top. okay, and the amniotic cavity has been cut, right? You can see the cut edge of the amnion. That means amniotic membrane has been cut, okay, so that you can see the embryo from the top. And which germinal layer you are seeing from the top? Of course, you will see the ectoderm, right? Okay. So if you see from the topmost germinal layer will be the ectoderm. Below the ectoderm, you'll have the mesoderm, and much below the mesoderm, you'll have the endoderm. Clear? Okay, and the endoderm is in communication with the yolk sac, whereas your new ectoderm is facing the amniotic cavity, right? Okay, so you try to understand the orientation of this section. So this is the dorsal view of the embryo where the amniotic membrane has been cut, and it has been labeled also. You can see the cut edge of the amnion, right? Now outside the neural plate, where you see the dot dot, the blackish dot 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 area, right? That is your ectodermal germ layer. Okay, that is your ectodermal germ layer. Okay, so you'll see that the part of the ectoderm which overlies the notochord in the midline of the embryo, okay, this part of the ectoderm will thicken and form a plate which is known as neural plate, right? Now, if you see the shape of the embryonic disc, the germinal disc, you'll see that the shape of the embryonic disc is like a slipper shape, right? So you can see this is the shape of the embryonic disc. This entire blue color is the ectoderm, and in the midline, you'll see that the ectoderm proliferates, okay, to form a thick mass of plate, which is called the neural plate, right? And the cells of the neural plate are called neuroectoderm, right? So just remember that neuroectoderm is in fact derived from ectoderm, okay, right? Okay, so you'll see that the shape of the embryonic germinal disc is slipper shape. So this is called slipper shape, right? So why it is slipper shape? Because you'll see just like how your slipper looks like, it is broad at the cephalic end. So this is the cephalic end of the embryonic disc, and this is the caudal end or the posterior end of the embryonic disc, right? Okay, so you'll see that towards the cephalic end of the embryonic disc, it is broader here, but towards the caudal end, the embryonic disc is narrower here, right? So you'll see that the overall shape of the embryonic disc is slipper shape, okay, during this time, right? Now let us go to the 20 days of age, which this model indicates. This is the model, okay, for indicating slide B, right? So when the embryo becomes 20 days old, you'll see that somites also start developing on either side of the neural plate, right? Now what happens in at this stage, you'll see that the neural plate, okay, the lateral edges, okay, so on either side you have this lateral edge, okay, so you have the right lateral edge, you have the left lateral edge. On either side, you'll see that the lateral edges of the neural plate, initially the neural plate is flat like an A, right? Now what happens over a period of time is that the lateral edges of the neural plate, they start elevating. That means they get raised up, okay? Now when they start elevating, what happens? You'll see that a groove forms. Automatically, naturally, a groove will form, okay? So a deep groove starts forming in the midline, okay? And this groove is known as neural groove. So there it is marked very nicely. You can see the neural groove which is formed as a result of the elevation of the lateral edges of the neural plate. That means initially your neural plate is flat like this, okay? It is flat. Now what happens? The two edges of the neural plate, they start elevating, okay? So when the edges of the neural plate, they start elevating, the edges are now known as neural folds. They will form the neural folds because they're elevating. So they will form the neural folds, okay? Now with period of time, what will happen is that the neural folds, they will start approaching each other in the midline, because ultimately the purpose of neurulation, as I told you, is that the neural plate has to be converted into a tube. Okay, so let us remove the word neural. Just remember a plate-like structure. So you know a plate is a flat surface-like structure. So a plate-like structure has to be converted into a tubular structure. Clear? Okay. So how will it convert into a tubular structure? The edges of the plate has to rise up. Okay. So when it rises up and they start approaching in the midline, they will start fusing with each other in the midline. And that is how the neural tube formation starts. Okay. Now please remember that the fusion of the neural folds, it starts in the cervical region. Cervical region of the embryo. Okay, cervical region of the embryo. That means towards the cephalic end of the embryo, right? And the fusion will progress both. Okay, so in the cervical region, the neural folds will fuse with each other, and this fusion will progress bidirectionally. Okay, both in the cranial direction as well as in the caudal direction. Okay, so that is how the plate is being converted into neural tube. And let us see the fate. And in the caudal end of the embryo, you can see this faint streak, Okay, so this faint streak which you can see labeled over there, this is called the primitive streak. Okay, and at the cranial end of the primitive streak you have the primitive pit. After it is a primitive node, in the center of the primitive node you have a shallow depressed area which is known as the primitive pit. Okay, and you know what is the purpose of primitive streak? It is through the formation of primitive streak that gastrulation process starts. Okay, and what is gastrulation? The gastrulation is a process by which all the three germinal layers are formed. Okay, that is your ectoderm, mesoderm, endoderm, right? And all these three germinal layers are derived from epiblast. Okay, so already you have done this lecture, so I will not go into detail. So let us go to the next slide. So I hope you have understood. Now as the neural fusion starts, okay, you'll see that on either side of the embryo, the somite formation is also starting. So you can see the somite formation in the 20 days old embryo. Okay. Okay, now this is a further advancement of the fusion of the neural folds, right? So as I told you, the neural fold fusion will start in the cervical region and it will progress bidirectionally, cranially and caudally. Okay. Now, as the fusion begins, as the fusion continues, right? The ends of the neural tube, okay, they remain open. Clear? Okay, the ends of the neural tube remain open. Okay, so as you can see in the slide B, you can see that at the cranial end of the embryo, there is an opening which is known as the cranial neuropore. So cranial neuropore is also known as anterior neuropore. And same thing at the caudal end of the embryo, you have an opening. Okay, at the caudal end of the neural tube, you have an opening which is known as the caudal or posterior neuropore. So both these openings, okay, at the cranial and caudal end of the neural tube, which is now fused, okay, the neural folds are fused to form the neural tube. So both these neuropores or both these openings are in communication, or they will communicate with which cavity? So which cavity lies over the ectoderm? Amniotic cavity. Right? Okay. So they are in communication with the amniotic cavity. Okay. Right? So you can see in the slide B that more or less the neural folds have fused with each other throughout the length of the neural tube except at the ends of the neural tube. Okay. Where the opening is still open. So at the cranial end of the neural tube, you have the anterior or cranial neuropore which is still open, and at the posterior end of the neural tube, you have the caudal or posterior neuropore which is still open and is in communication with the amniotic cavity. Okay, so this is what day of the embryo. So the B, number B, slide B shows it is a 23-day-old embryo. Okay, slide A on the other hand shows that it is a 22-day-old embryo. Okay, so at present with me I have this model. So this model is depicting this slide A, right? Picture A you can see. So this is depicting with picture A. So this is a 22-day-old model, right? 22-day-old embryo model, right? And you can see that the neural fusion has already started and it is progressing, right? And as the neural tube is forming, simultaneously the somites formation is also taking place on either side of the neural tube, right? Okay, but here the neural tube is not yet completely formed. Okay, right? In B you can see that the neural tube is more or less formed except at their openings. Clear? Okay, so I hope this is clear. So I hope the students, you are clear. If you're not clear, you can ask, right? Okay, so now here coming to the transverse section of the embryo. So these are transverse sections of the embryo which are taken at various stages of development of the formation of the neural tube. So you see over here in slide A, okay, in slide A, you see that you can see the three germinal layers. You can see the ectoderm, okay, which is facing the amniotic cavity, like I told you earlier. Then below that, so ectoderm is highlighted in blue color. Okay, so you can see those epithelium of the ectoderm highlighted in blue color. Then you have the intraembryonic mesoderm, which is red color, and you have the yellow lined epithelium, okay, which is also lining the wall of the yolk sac and is facing the yolk sac cavity. So that is your endoderm, right? And in the midline below the ectoderm, you have a solid cord of cells, which is known as the notochord. Okay, so as I told you earlier, what happens is that portion, the midline portion of the ectoderm, so you see in slide B, now come to slide B, the midline portion of the ectoderm which overlies the notochord, it starts thickening or it starts proliferating, okay, to form a plate which is known as neural plate. Okay, so neural plate is formed in slide B, right? And the cells of the neural plate are known as neuroectoderm. Okay, so basically they are derived from ectoderm. Just remember that. The cells of the neural plate are called neuroectoderm. Now in slide C, you can see that now the edges, the lateral edges of the neural plate, okay, they start elevating. So when they start elevating, that means when the edges of the neural plate rise up, okay, a deep midline groove is formed, which is known as the neural groove. Okay, now the edges of the neural plate, okay, the edges of the neural plate, which are called the neural folds, right, they start coming close to each other in the midline, and ultimately they'll fuse with each other to ultimately form the neural tube. Okay, so in slide D, you can see the formation of the neural tube now, because the neural folds have approached each other in midline and they have fused with each other, and now they have formed the neural tube. So fusion of the neural folds starts in the cervical region. Remember that, okay? And when the neural tube is formed, please remember that the openings, the ends, okay, the cranial end and the caudal end of the neural tube is still open. Okay, and these openings are respectively known as cranial or anterior neuropore and caudal or posterior neuropore. So they are still in communication with amniotic cavity. So still the neural tube is not completely closed. Okay, so why the neural tube is not completely closed? Because their ends are still in communication with the amniotic cavity. So these openings also have to be closed to form completely the formation of the neural tube. Clear? So let us go to the next slide. So here we will see how the neural tube is now completely formed, okay, by the closure of the neuropores. So here on 25th day, okay, of the embryo, right, you can see that the anterior neuropore or the cranial neuropore, it closes. So that opening will close, okay, but the posterior opening or the posterior neuropore is still open, okay. So after 3 days, that is when the embryo is 28 days old, intrauterine life, you'll see that the caudal or the posterior neuropore, it closes. So on 28th day, once the posterior neuropore closes, you can say that the neural tube is now completely closed and it is completely formed. Clear? Okay. So neural tube is formed when the openings also closes, right? So this is often asked in the viva. When do the anterior neuropore closes? When does the posterior neuropore closes? So this we have to remember. Okay. So here, this is a schematic diagram or a simple diagram showing you the formation of the neural tube and a very special type of cell, which is known as a neural crest cell, right? So as I told you already, again, this is just repetition. So you'll see that the ectoderm, which lies over the notochord, okay, in the midline of the embryo, it thickens or it proliferates to form a plate of cell which is known as neural plate, right? Now the lateral edges of the neural plate, they start elevating and they will form the neural folds, okay? Now as the neural folds are being formed, please come to B, slide B, okay? So as the neural folds are being formed, the tips of each neural fold, okay, the tips of each neural fold, which is shown as red color, round red color, okay, they form a special type of cells which is known as neural crest cells. So why they are called neural crest cells? Why the word crest? Because the tip, so tip is also known as crest, okay. So the tip or the crest of each neural fold, okay, will form some specialized type of cells which are known as neural crest cells. So these are also neuroectodermal cells. They are also derived from neuroectoderm. And as the neural folds close with each other, you'll see that these neural crest cells, okay, they separate out, okay. That means they come out from the dorsal wall of the neural tube and they start migrating laterally, okay. So they will form certain specialized structures, okay. So the derivatives of neural crest, I think all of you know. You have done it in general embryology, right? Abhi derivatives I'll tell you. So I'll tell you the derivatives. So till here you've understood how the neural crest cells are formed? Yes. It is formed throughout the length of the neural tube, the neural crest cells. Please remember, wherever you have the formation of the neural tube, okay, you are going to have the neural crest cells present throughout the length of the neural tube, okay. So just remember the tips or the crest of the neural folds as they approach each other in the midline, right? They contain specialized type of cells which are known as neural crest cells. So when just before they fuse, these neural crest cells, they will come out or they will migrate out from the dorsal wall of the neural tube. They will pass laterally into the wall of the embryo and they will give rise to certain structures. So this is often asked in the viva. What are neural crest cells? Number one. And what are the derivatives of neural crest cells? Okay, right? So same diagram. So here you can see in slide C, okay, you can see in slide C, the neural crest cells have migrated from the dorsal wall of the neural tube, and they will go laterally into the body wall of the embryo, and they will give rise to certain structures. So what are the certain structures which you can see here in slide C? It will give rise to sympathetic ganglion, the sympathetic chain, okay, along with the sympathetic ganglion. Then it will give rise to this pre-aortic ganglion, enteric ganglion, okay, and it will also form your suprarenal medulla, okay, or the adrenal medulla. So these are the derivatives of neural crest cells, and these are very, very important. You just have to mug it up, right? Okay, so quickly I'll go through it. The connective tissue and bones of face and the skull. So basically connective tissue and bones of the head and neck region, right? Then cranial sensory ganglia. Okay, so you have sensory ganglia related to cranial nerves. Example, you have the trigeminal ganglion, right? And similarly, you'll have the sensory ganglion of the 9th, 10th cranial nerves and so on, okay? Then you have the C cells or the calcitonin cells, which are the cells of the thyroid gland. So they're also derived from neural crest cells. Then you have the conotruncal septum of the heart, okay? Then you have the odontoblast, okay, from the teeth. The dermis in the face and the neck region, okay, so that is head and neck region. Just remember, dermis of the head and neck region. Then the spinal or the dorsal root ganglia, sympathetic chain along with all its ganglia as well as the pre-aortic ganglia. Then parasympathetic ganglia, adrenal medulla, Schwann cells, glial cells, arachnoid and pia mater, and melanocytes. Okay, so melanocytes are the pigment cells which are found in the epidermis of skin. Right? So all these structures are derived from neural crest cells. Clear? Okay? Okay, so let us go to further into the development of the CNS. Now this will get a bit more complicated. So I hope you have understood till here. If you have not understood, you please let me know. Have you understood or no? Any part which you have not understood?
Understood, ma'am.
Understood, no? So you have to read first. Okay, read on your own. It will be a bit difficult. But if you read on your own, it will become easier. Okay, so coming to the 4th week of the embryonic life. Now, when you talk of 4th week, please remember it is the 4th week of embryonic life or 4th week of intrauterine life. Okay, so here you will see that in the 4th week, now the neural tube initially is like a tubular structure. Okay, so as it progresses further, okay, with the closure of the neuropores, your neural tube formation is complete. Now what happens? You will see that the cranial end or the cephalic end of the neural tube, it is dilated or it is broadened. Okay, so the cephalic end or the cranial end of the neural tube is broadened, okay, whereas the caudal end of the neural tube remains narrow, tubular, right? So this narrow caudal part of the neural tube, which remains narrow, cylindrical and tubular, okay, in shape, it will give rise to the future spinal cord. Okay, just keep that in mind. The caudal narrow cylindrical part of neural tube will give rise to spinal cord. Okay, what about the cephalic end of the neural tube, which enlarges? It enlarges means it will show some dilations, right? It will broaden to show some dilations. So the cranial end or the cephalic end of the neural tube will form the brain. Clear? Okay, and this is why even if you see in the adult structure, if you see your atlas or if you see the cadaver, you always see that the brain is a enlarged structure, dilated structure, even your brain stem compared to the spinal cord. Okay, so this is related because of its embryological development, right? So let us go in detail. Now in the 4th week, what happens? This slide is focused on the cephalic end of neural tube now. Keep in mind, okay? So the slide is focused on the development of the cephalic end of neural tube, which is now dilated, okay, to show 3 dilations which are known as primary brain vesicles. Okay, so cephalic end of the neural tube is dilated. It will have 3 dilations, and these 3 dilations will form the primary brain vesicles from which your future brain will develop. Clear? Okay. Okay, so let us see what are these vesicles. So here you come to slide A. You'll see that the 3 vesicles are, you have the prosencephalon, so you have to mug up these words. So prosencephalon is also known as forebrain, okay, forebrain. Then you have the second dilation, which is known as the mesencephalon, okay, which is also known as the midbrain, okay. And you have the third dilation towards the spinal cord, okay. So the third dilation is known as the rhombencephalon, which is known as the hindbrain. Clear? So from these three brain vesicles, the prosencephalon, the mesencephalon, and the rhombencephalon, you will have the development of the brain. Okay, so brain will develop from these three primary brain vesicles. Right? So basically your forebrain, your midbrain, and your hindbrain, which constitutes the entire brain, that will develop from these three primary brain vesicles. And where do you find these primary brain vesicles? You will find this primary brain vesicles developing from the cephalic end of the neural tube, which is enlarged. Right? Okay. Now, simultaneously, when these brain vesicles are being formed, so listen carefully now, when these brain vesicles are being formed, certain bends, okay, bends, that means flexures, right? So initially your neural tube was straight like this, okay, but as the cephalic end of the neural tube is now dilating to form these primary brain vesicles, what will happen as they are forming the brain vesicles, okay, at the same time, certain bends will develop when these brain vesicles are being formed. Okay, so these bends are known as flexures. So you know flexure. So for example, when you flex your elbow joint, you are decreasing the angle, right, at the joint, right? So same thing here, you will see that certain flexures or certain bends are being formed in the region of the primary brain vesicles. So that means, in other words, the cephalic end of the neural tube is no longer straight, but it's showing some bendings. Okay, it's showing some folds or bendings, right? So what are these flexures or bends called? So we have two flexures which will develop. Okay, the first flexure to develop is called the cervical flexure, which is highlighted in red color. So if you see the cervical flexure is a flexure or it's a bend which develops at the junction between the rhombencephalon and the spinal cord. Right? So that is the first flexure to develop. So initially your neural tube was straight like this. So just imagine if this is the brain vesicle, this enlarged part of my hand represents the brain vesicle, and this narrow caudal part represents the caudal end of the neural tube, which will form the spinal cord. Okay? The first flexure will develop like this. So it will bend here. Clear? So this flexure is called the cervical flexure. So this cervical flexure is a bend which takes place, okay, at the junction between rhombencephalon, okay, and the future spinal cord. I hope it is clear. Then the second flexure to develop immediately after the cervical flexure is the cephalic flexure. Cephalic flexure. Now this cephalic flexure is a bend which develops in the region of midbrain. Okay, so it is a bend which develops in the region of midbrain or the mesencephalon, and that's why you can see that the mesencephalon is bending. Okay, it is bending. It is bending down. Okay, so this flexure is known as cephalic flexure. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So during 4th week of development, what happens? The cephalic end of the neural tube, it will show dilations. Okay, so basically how many number of dilations? 3 dilations, and these 3 dilations will form the primary brain vesicles. Okay, and they are known as prosencephalon, mesencephalon, rhombencephalon. Now, when these dilations are appearing, when these primary brain vesicles are being formed, at the same time, you will have bends, okay, which are also forming in this region, right? And these bends are known as flexures. So we have 2 flexures. We have the cervical flexure, which will first develop, okay, and this develops in the region between the rhombencephalon and the spinal cord, and you have another flexure which develops, that is the cephalic flexure, which develops in the region of the mesencephalon. And you can see now the bends which are developing in the primary brain vesicles. Clear? Okay. So I hope this is clear. Now in slide B, this shows you the lumen. Okay, so this is showing you the lumen of the primary brain vesicles, right? So you have the lumen of the spinal cord, which communicates with the lumen of the primary brain vesicles, and all the primary brain vesicles have been labeled, right? And that demarcation which I've shown there in the red dotted line, that is showing you the bend. Okay, so that is the site where the cervical flexure will first develop at the junction of rhombencephalon and spinal cord. And then you have a second bend which is shown by the blue dotted line. Okay, so that blue dotted line represents the cephalic flexure, which is a bend developing in the region of mesencephalon. Right? Okay. So I hope this is clear. So initially your neural tube was straight, but because of the development of the brain vesicles and the flexures, you'll see that in the region, the cranial region of the neural tube, it starts folding, right? So it becomes more or less like a U shape, inverted U shape. Okay, so let us see. Now this is in the 5th week. So there is further development of brain vesicles. Okay, so it becomes more complex, a little bit more complicated, but it is not very difficult if you try to understand. So let us see what further development takes place. Now already I told you we have three primary brain vesicles, prosencephalon, mesencephalon, rhombencephalon, right? Along with the development of the two flexures, the CC flexures, cervical and cephalic flexure, right? Now what happens in the 5th week? You'll see that the prosencephalon, okay, so prosencephalon is a dilatation which is the largest dilatation of the primary brain vesicle. It lies at the cranial most end of the neural tube. Now this prosencephalon, okay, it will differentiate further into telencephalon, okay. So telencephalon is the middle portion. You can see the midline portion, and this telencephalon will give rise on either side to two lateral outpocketings which are known as the primitive cerebral hemisphere. So remember that telencephalon gives rise to two cerebral hemisphere along with the midline portion. So that midline portion of the telencephalon will form the lamina terminalis. Lamina terminalis, right? Okay. So telencephalon gives rise to the two cerebral hemispheres plus lamina terminalis. Okay. And the prosencephalon, okay, besides giving rise to telencephalon, the prosencephalon will also give rise to diencephalon. Diencephalon. Okay. So you can see in the slide A, the diencephalon is marked there. So this diencephalon develops as a result. So you come in slide C, try to see in slide C. The diencephalon develops as a result of the outpocketing of the optic cup. So as the optic cup, it evaginates outside, okay, it will form the diencephalon. Okay, so diencephalon is formed as a result of the outpouching of the optic vesicles or the optic cup when it is being formed, right? So prosencephalon will further differentiate into telencephalon, which will form the two primitive cerebral hemispheres along with the lamina terminalis. So the midline portion of the telencephalon forms the lamina terminalis, and the two lateral outpocketings indicates the primitive cerebral hemisphere. Okay, and the prosencephalon will also give rise to diencephalon, which is formed as a result of the outpocketing of the optic vesicles. Okay, now your diencephalon in the adults will form the hypothalamus, thalamus, epithalamus, subthalamus, metathalamus, right? So all the components of thalamus will be formed from diencephalon, right? Your mesencephalon will remain same as it is, okay? It will not differentiate into any subparts like your prosencephalon does. Now coming to rhombencephalon, so just like your prosencephalon differentiates further into two parts, telencephalon and diencephalon, similarly your rhombencephalon will also differentiate into two parts. Okay, it will give rise to metencephalon and myelencephalon, right? Okay, so metencephalon and myelencephalon are developed from rhombencephalon. What will your metencephalon give rise to? Metencephalon will give rise to pons and cerebellum. Pons and cerebellum. Clear? So pons and cerebellum will develop from metencephalon, and from myelencephalon your medulla oblongata will develop. Okay, so medulla oblongata will develop from myelencephalon. Now you know the reason why rhombencephalon is called hindbrain. So that's why rhombencephalon is called hindbrain. So what constitutes the hindbrain in adults? All of you know what constitutes the hindbrain in adults? Any students can say? Or you can just tell me, name the parts of the hindbrain. So pons, yes, pons, cerebellum and medulla oblongata. I hope it is clear. So how are these derived? They are derived from rhombencephalon. Okay, so your rhombencephalon will further differentiate into metencephalon and myelencephalon. Metencephalon will give rise to pons and cerebellum. Okay, and your myelencephalon will form the medulla oblongata. So these are the three parts of the hindbrain. Okay, now when these brain vesicles are further differentiating, okay, that is your prosencephalon and the rhombencephalon, they're further differentiating into subparts to form specific parts of the brain now. They're forming specific parts of the brain now, right? You'll see that some bends again appear. Okay, some bends again appear. So you have a flexure which is known as pontine flexure, and you have a deep groove which appears, which is known as the rhombencephalic isthmus. Rhombencephalic isthmus, right? So you'll see that a deep groove, you see in the slide A, a deep groove appears, okay, which is called the rhombencephalic isthmus. So this deep groove, it appears at the junction between mesencephalon and rhombencephalon. Okay, it appears in the junction between mesencephalon, that is at the junction between the midbrain and the hindbrain, in other words. Okay, and immediately this is followed by the appearance of pontine flexure. So once rhombencephalic isthmus is formed, which demarcates the pons from, which demarcates the midbrain from the rest of the hindbrain, okay, immediately you'll have another flexure which will develop in the region of the rhombencephalon, and that is known as pontine flexure. So what is the importance of this pontine flexure? The importance of this pontine flexure is that this flexure, okay, this bend will demarcate, okay, the metenkephalon from myelencephalon. Clear? Okay. So it will demarcate the region of metenkephalon from myelencephalon, and you already know what metenkephalon forms. It will form pons, cerebellum, and your myelencephalon will form medulla oblongata. So these regions are all now, they're all getting demarcated, okay, because now they're going to form specific regions of the brain. So junction is now being formed. Clear? Okay. So I hope it is clear. Now you come to slide C. So slide C is showing you the lumen. Okay. So here you can see the central canal, which is the lumen of the primitive spinal cord. So this is communicating with the lumen of the brain vesicles, right? So the central canal of the spinal cord is communicating with the fourth ventricle. So fourth ventricle is the cavity of rhombencephalon or the hindbrain. Fourth ventricle is the cavity of rhombencephalon or hindbrain. And the fourth ventricle, okay, will communicate with the cavity of mesencephalon or the midbrain, which is known as the aqueduct of Sylvius. Now, initially, this aqueduct of Sylvius is large. It is a large lumen, as you can see from the slide. Okay, but later on, with the further development of the midbrain, what happens to the cavity of the midbrain? It narrows. It becomes very narrow passage. Okay, and it forms the aqueduct of Sylvius. So initially, it is broad. Later on, it will become narrow. Now, this aqueduct of Sylvius, which is the cavity of the midbrain or the mesencephalon, will further communicate with the cavity of diencephalon. So, what is the cavity of diencephalon called? The third ventricle. Third ventricle. Okay, and this third ventricle in turn will communicate with the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, so you know that each cerebral hemisphere has a cavity which is known as the lateral ventricle. All of you know that? Lateral ventricle. Okay, so the third ventricle will communicate with the lateral ventricle, okay, of each cerebral hemisphere through a small opening which is known as the interventricular foramen of Monro. Interventricular foramen of Monro. Right? I hope this is clear. So what is the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere called? Lateral ventricle. Cavity of diencephalon, third ventricle. Okay, cavity of mesencephalon, aqueduct of Sylvius. Cavity of hindbrain or rhombencephalon, fourth ventricle. And what is the cavity of the spinal cord called? Central canal. So all these cavities, they are intercommunicating with each other. Clear? And what passes through all these cavities? What fills up all these cavities? Your cerebrospinal fluid, CSF. Clear? Okay, so CSF, right? And CSF is produced in certain ventricles we have not done the ventricular system, no? So you will have a lecture on ventricular system. So it will be told to you that certain ventricles, they form the CSF, okay? The production of CSF takes place. Okay, so now let us start with the further development of the spinal cord, okay? So further development of brain, I will continue in the next class. So further development of the spinal cord. So once the neural tube is closed completely, that means the neuropores have been closed at both the ends, right? So you have a closed tubular structure now. And as I told you, the caudal end of the neural tube remains tubular. So that will form the future spinal cord. Whereas the cranial end of the neural tube shows dilations, okay, or enlargements, which will form the primitive brain vesicles, which will give rise to your future brain, right? So let us forget about the brain side. Let us concentrate on the spinal cord development. Okay, so if you take a cut section of the caudal part of the neural tube, recently closed neural tube, the caudal portion, which will give rise to the future spinal cord, what are you going to see under the microscope? So you see over here in the first slide, you can see the neural tube. So this is, you just assume that this is the site taken from this is a transverse section of the embryo taken from the site of the caudal end of the neural tube. Okay, caudal end of the neural tube, which will give rise to the future spinal cord. Okay, which remains narrow, tubular, right? So when you take a cut section and you see it under the microscope, you'll see that the entire thickness or the entire wall of the neural tube, okay, it is made up of a thick layer of cells. Thick layer of cells. And these cells are called neuroepithelial cells. Okay, now all these neuroepithelial cells, okay, they are arranged like an epithelium, as the name suggests, neuroepithelial cells. They are arranged in the form of a epithelium. And what type of epithelium will they form? They will form a pseudostratified epithelium. Okay, pseudostratified epithelium. So they form a thick layer of epithelium, that is a pseudostratified epithelium, and these cells are called neuroepithelial cells. Okay, and you can see this side of the wall is facing the lumen of the neural tube, okay, and the other side is the opposite side of the neural tube, where you have the external limiting membrane or the basement membrane of the epithelium, right? So you will see that all these neuroepithelial cells, they all touch the basement membrane, okay, they all touch the basement membrane. Now towards the lumen side of the neural tube, facing the lumen of the neural tube, you have these neuroepithelial cells which are enlarged. They are undergoing mitosis, okay, they are dividing rapidly. So as they divide rapidly, they will give rise to more and more neuroepithelial cells, okay, which will be pushed towards the periphery, right? Okay, because they're dividing rapidly, they'll be pushed towards the periphery, and that is how they form a pseudostratified layer of epithelium. Okay, so keep in mind that all these layers, all these cells are touching the basement membrane, right? So let us see further differentiation of the neuroepithelium. Okay, you can see as the embryo progresses in growth, okay, you will see that later on these neuroepithelial cells, when they give rise to more and more neuroepithelial cells, okay, a time will come when these neuroepithelial cells starts differentiating to form the primitive nerve cell, which is known as the neuroblast. Okay, so neuroblast is nothing but a primitive nerve cell which is derived by differentiation of neuroepithelial cell. Right? Okay, so these neuroblasts, as they are formed, they are pushed towards the periphery. Okay, so you can see the neuroblasts, they are pushed towards the periphery, and you'll see that these neuroblasts or the primitive nerve cells which are formed from the neuroepithelial cells, they have a round nucleus, okay, they have a pale staining nucleoplasm, and they have a dark staining nucleolus, as you can see from the slide. Right? Now these neuroblasts, okay, they will gradually, the number will increase because more and more neuroblasts are being formed from the neuroepithelial cells. So as more and more neuroblasts are being formed by differentiation of the neuroepithelial cells, what will happen? This neuroblast layer will become quite thick. Okay, it will become quite thick. It will surround the neuroepithelial layer, okay, as an outer zone, which is called the mantle layer. Okay, so when this neuroblast cells layer, it becomes very thick because more and more neuroblasts are being added, okay, by the differentiation of the neuroepithelial cells. They form an outer thick zone surrounding the neuroepithelial cells, and this outer layer is now known as mantle layer. Now this mantle layer will form the future gray matter of the spinal cord. Clear? It will form the future gray matter of the spinal cord, right? Okay, so I hope you have understood this. Now with the formation of neuroblast, please remember, once neuroblast is formed from the neuroepithelial cells, the neuroblast will no longer divide. That means neuroblast is also known as primitive nerve cell, as I've told you earlier. So keep in mind that the neuroblasts, once they are formed, they lose their ability to divide. So neuroblasts cannot divide. Okay, so how will neuroblast increase its number? By addition of neuroblast from the neuroepithelial layer. Right? So the neuroepithelial cells will divide and they will differentiate to form more and more number of neuroblasts. Neuroblasts cannot divide. They lose their ability to divide. That's why we say that in adults, once neurons die, they cannot regenerate. Neurons do not regenerate. All of you know that, no? Neurons are the only cells. They are having a unique property. They are the cells in the body which do not regenerate. Once they die, they die. They are replaced by scar tissue or fibrous tissue. Clear? So this is because the neuroblast which is formed, which is a primitive nerve cell, the neuroblast loses the ability to divide. So it is related to its embryological development. Right? So come back over here. So in the slide A, you can see the inner lining, that is the neuroepithelial layer. So this neuroepithelial layer will form the neuroblast. Okay, so this neuroblast will ultimately become so thick, okay, so that it forms an outer zone which surrounds the inner neuroepithelial layer, and this outer zone is called the mantle layer, and the mantle layer will form the future gray matter of the spinal cord. Right? Now outside the mantle layer, you will see another layer here which is called the marginal layer. Okay, so I will tell you what is the marginal layer, how it is formed. So let us first concentrate on the mantle layer for now. So on either side of the neural tube, you will see that there are thickenings. Okay, on either side of the neural tube, that is on either side of the neuroepithelial layer, you have a pair of thickenings. So these pair of thickenings, okay, they are known as the basal plate ventrally and alar plate dorsally. Okay, so these thickenings, they constitute the mantle layer. Okay, both these plates, the basal plate and the alar plate, they constitute the mantle layer. Okay, so already I told you that in slide A, the dorsal root ganglion or the spinal ganglion is derived from neural crest cells, right? Okay, so the dorsal root ganglion is a collection of neuroblast which is derived from neural crest cells. Keep that in mind, right? Now these neuroblast, okay, in the dorsal root ganglion, as they are forming the neurons, as they are maturing into neurons, okay, they will also give rise to processes, right? So they will give rise to a central process which will go towards the spinal cord, and they will give rise to a peripheral process which will go towards the periphery, okay, to innervate the sensory receptor organs, right? Now these central processes of the dorsal root ganglion come in slide B, okay? So they will, when they enter the spinal cord, most of these central processes will either end in the dorsal sensory horn, okay, so which is labeled as S, capital S, that is the dorsal sensory horn, or some of these fibers may ascend directly to higher brain centers, right? So collectively these bundles of nerve fibers which enter the dorsal, which enter the spinal cord, okay, and which are formed by the central processes of the neurons of the dorsal root ganglia, they will form the dorsal sensory root. Okay, they will form the dorsal sensory root. So some of these fibers of the dorsal sensory root may terminate in the dorsal sensory horn, or some of these fibers may ascend directly, okay, to higher centers in the brain, traveling through the marginal layer. Clear? Okay. Now if you see the peripheral process of the dorsal root ganglion, which is going outwards, right, towards the body, okay, to innervate the peripheral sensory receptor organs, you will see that the peripheral processes, they will unite with the ventral motor root, okay, they unite with the ventral motor root in the intervertebral foramina of the vertebral column, and they will form the trunk of the spinal nerve, okay, they will form the trunk of the spinal nerve. So please keep in mind that now the trunk of the spinal nerve is a mixed nerve, right? Okay. So it is a mixed nerve. Ventral motor root is motor in function, dorsal sensory root is sensory in function. So when they unite, they form a mixed spinal nerve. Now this spinal nerve will immediately divide into a ventral rami and a dorsal rami. So the dorsal rami will go towards the back of the body wall, innervate the skin, the muscles and the joints of the back of the body wall, whereas the ventral rami of the spinal nerve, okay, they will go and innervate the muscles, the skin, the muscles and the joints of the ventral and the lateral body wall. Okay, I hope this is clear. Okay, now later on, okay, as the spinal cord further differentiates, you will see that a third horn also develops in the gray matter of the spinal cord. So this third horn is called the intermediate horn of the spinal cord, which is shown there. You can see a slight outpocketing between the sensory horn and the motor horn, which I've labeled as S and M. Okay, so in between you have a small outpocketing. Okay, so this horn is known as the intermediate horn, and this intermediate horn, it is present only at a certain, only in a certain region of the spinal cord. It is found from T1 to L2 or L3 segment of the spinal cord. So this intermediate horn contains the preganglionic sympathetic neurons. Okay, they will give rise to the sympathetic nervous system. Okay, they are forming a part of the sympathetic nervous system, right? Now let us again see what other cells will neuroepithelial cells form. So neuroepithelial cells will form not only the neuroblasts, which will give rise to the future nerve cells or the future neurons, but they will also give rise to glioblast. So glioblast cells will give rise to neuroglial cells. And what are neuroglial cells? Neuroglial cells are nothing but the cells which form the connective tissue of the central nervous system. So connective tissue cells of the central nervous system are known as neuroglial cells, and they are derived from glioblast. Okay, and the third type of cell which is derived from neuroepithelial cell is the ependymal cells. Okay, ependymal cells. So this ependymal cells, it lines the inner wall of all the ventricular cavities and the central canal of the spinal cord. Right? So here you'll see that the neuroepithelial cells, I've labeled them as parent cells. So these parent cells, that is the neuroepithelial cells, will differentiate to give rise to three types of children or three offsprings. So the first offspring it forms is the neuroblast, right? The second offspring it will form is the glioblast, from which your neuroglial cells will develop. And the third offspring it will form is the ependymal cell. I hope this is clear. Okay. Now, already I told you how the neuroblasts are differentiated to form, so I will not go into detail, already it has been explained. Now, once neuroblast production ceases, Okay, this word is very important. Once neuroblast production ceases, that means it stops to form from neuroepithelial cells, then only will the neuroepithelial cells will differentiate now to give rise to the second offspring, that is your glioblast. Okay, so once neuroblast production ceases, the neuroepithelial cells will now differentiate to form another kind of cell which is completely different from neuroblast, and this cell is known as glioblast. So glioblast will give rise to the future neuroglial cells, and you'll see that from the glioblast, what kind of cells will develop? You'll have two types of astrocytes. You'll have the protoplasmic and you'll have the fibrillar astrocytes. So these astrocytes are found in the mantle layer. Mantle layer. So you know that mantle layer gives rise to the gray matter of the spinal cord. Okay. So these astrocytes, they lie between the neurons and the blood vessels in the gray matter of the spinal cord. Then another type of cell which arises from the glioblast is the oligodendroglial cell. So oligodendroglial cells are special cells. Okay, so they are special cells of the CNS, which is responsible for myelination of the axons of nerve fibers in the CNS. Right? So one oligodendroglial cells can myelinate up to 50 axons. Okay, up to 50 axons or the nerve fibers. Clear? Okay, so one oligodendroglial cells can myelinate up to 50 axons. Right? And then you have another special type of cell which develops last. That is the microglial cells. Now microglial cells are not derived from glioblast, but they are derived from vascular mesenchymal cells. Okay, that means from monocytes. So you know that monocyte is a cell component of the blood. Right? So microglial cells are derived from vascular mesenchyme cells, which are the precursors of the monocytes, and these monocytes will form the microglial cells. So these microglial cells, they are also special cells in the sense that they act as phagocytic cells. So they function as phagocytic cells, or they are also known as scavenger cells. So they will eat up, or they will phagocytose, or the bacteria, all the foreign antigens, etc. Right? Okay? So microglial cells are the only neuroglial cells which are not derived from glioblast, but which are derived from vascular mesenchyme. Clear? Okay. Now you have another kind of cell, neuroglial cell, which I have not shown here, and that is your Schwann cell. Okay. Now Schwann cell is derived from neural crest. Keep that in mind. Schwann cell is derived from neural crest. Okay. And Schwann cells are also special type of cells because they will myelinate the axons of the peripheral nervous system. So Schwann cells myelinate axons of the peripheral nervous system, and the ratio is 1:1. One Schwann cell will myelinate only one axon of the PNS. Okay, right? Now once glioblast production ceases, that means once all the neuroglial cells have been formed, okay, from the neuroepithelial cells. So once the glioblast production ceases, the remaining neuroepithelial cells will differentiate or will get modified to form the last type of cell, which is the ependymal cell. Clear? Which is the ependymal cell. So these ependymal cells, they line the inner surface. They are a single layer of epithelial cells, and they line the inner wall or the inner surface of all the ventricular cavities, including the central canal of spinal cord. Clear? Okay? Through which the CSF passes. Right? So myelination of nerve fibers starts in the 4th month of intrauterine life or fetal life. So you see in slide A, you can see the axon, okay, the emerging axon from the ventral motor neuron in the ventral gray horn, right? And initially the axon is without any myelin sheath. It is naked, in other words. You can see the rootlet, not covered by any myelin sheath. Okay, so once the fetus enters the 4th month, you'll see that gradually, now you'll see that myelination starts around the axon. Now that part of the axon which passes through the marginal layer, okay, of the spinal cord will be myelinated by oligodendroglial cell, because you know that spinal cord is part of your CNS, okay, and that part of the axon which lies outside the spinal cord, okay, so I told you that any nerve, any neural tissue which lies outside the spinal cord or outside the brain, they are forming your PNS, right? So this part of the axon which passes the spinal cord, lies outside the spinal cord, they will be myelinated by Schwann cell. Clear? Okay, so and they will form the neurolemma sheath. So there will be repeated coiling of the cytoplasmic membrane of these cells, and they will form the myelin sheath. Okay, so changes in position of the spinal cord. So at 3rd month, you will see that the 3rd month of intrauterine life, you will see that the length of the spinal cord is the same as the length of the vertebral column. Same ratio. So 1:1. Clear? Okay. So if the length of the vertebral column is this much, the length of the spinal cord is also same. Clear? Now in the 5th month, okay, what happens is that the vertebral column grows longer, okay, whereas the spinal cord does not grow as long as the vertebral column, right? So that means the spinal cord is shorter in length compared to the length of the vertebral column. So what happens to the spinal nerves? The spinal nerves will now have to take a longer route in order to reach their appropriate vertebral segment. Okay. For example, in the slide A, you can see the rootlets. You can see the rootlets of the first sacral nerve, the S1, the first sacral spinal nerve, S1 spinal nerve, right? So since the length of the vertebral column is the same as the length of the spinal cord, you will see that S1 nerve, it goes horizontally, okay, because the S1 vertebra lies just in front of it. Okay, but if you see in B, you'll see that the length of the vertebral column is now longer than the length of the spinal cord. So what happens to the first sacral nerve? Now it has to take a longer oblique direction in order to reach its corresponding vertebra. Right? That is the S1 vertebra. Right? Now let us see in C, at birth. What happens at birth? The length of the vertebral column is now much longer as compared to the length of the spinal cord. And at birth, you'll see that the lower end of the spinal cord, it terminates at the close to the lower border of third lumbar vertebra, or at the level of L3 vertebra. Okay, that is at birth, right? So as a result, since the spinal cord is now much shorter in length compared to the length of the vertebral column, the nerves, the corresponding spinal nerves, have to take a much longer, more or less vertical course in order to reach their corresponding vertebra. Clear? Because they have to exit, okay, near the corresponding vertebra. Clear? Right? So at birth, you know that the lower end of the spinal cord terminates at L3. But in adults, the lower end of the spinal cord terminates close to L1. Okay? So neural tube defects. So as the name suggests, what are neural tube defects? So neural tube defects are the defects, okay, resulting due to abnormal closure of neural tube. Simple as that. So from the name you will come to know. What are neural tube defects? These neural tube defects are defects due to abnormal closure of the neural tube. So when the neural tube fails to close properly, it will result in a neural tube defects. And you have many defects. It can affect the cervical, the cephalic end of the neural tube, that is in the brain region, okay, or it can affect the neural tube in the caudal region. So that is your spinal cord region, okay, or it can affect the vertebra also, that is your spine, right? So when the neural tube does not close completely as a result of failure of neural folds to close, a neural tube develops. Okay, so neural tube defect are those defects, okay, because of incomplete closure of the neural tube due to failure of neural folds to close. Now what are the causes? So most important causes are teratogens, right? So during pregnancy, if the mother takes medicines, or if the mother smokes or takes, any drugs, okay, like valproic acid or excess amount of vitamin A, right, or does smoking. So these are all teratogens. So they will give rise to neural tube defect. And you have other causes of neural tube defect: hypothermia, obesity, diabetes, and so on. So these are very, very common congenital defects of the spinal cord, and you have a variety of neural tube defects. And the most common is spina bifida. Right, and you have types of spina bifida. So let us see the various types of spina bifida. So you have the spina bifida occulta, which is common, seen in 10% of the population. Then you have the meningocele, you have the meningomyelocele, and you have the rachis. Right? So what does the name suggest? Spina bifida. Just the name, spina bifida. That means the spine is bifid. Okay. So as you can see in the slide, what happens here? In spina bifida, the vertebral arches, okay, they fail to fuse with each other, right? So the vertebral arches fail to fuse, they become bifid, okay? Spine does not develop, right? So vertebral arches of the vertebra, they fail to fuse, and as a result, a defect is present, okay? So this defect may involve the nervous tissue or may not involve the nervous tissue. Okay, so let us see in spina bifida occulta. You'll see that in this slide, okay, there is failure of the vertebral arches to fuse, but it does not involve the nervous tissue. Okay, and you can see that the defect is closed by skin, and over that defect, in this, you have a patch of hair over the defect, covering the defect. Now, such people do not have any disability. They do not have any motor disability. They lead completely a normal life. So how are they diagnosed? Such individuals are diagnosed incidentally when they do X-ray of the back because of other reasons, right? Okay, so the spinal cord and the meninges are not affected here, but only the thing is that the vertebral arches do not fuse, right? And these persons lead a normal life. Okay, then you have a severe type of neural tube defect, which is known as meningocele. Now, the rest of the neural tube defects which you see here, they are severe forms of NTDs, right? They are severe forms of spina bifida. Okay, so you have the meningocele. In meningocele, you'll see again there is failure of the vertebral arches to fuse. Okay, and at the same time, there's protrusion of the membrane of the meninges. There's protrusion of the meninges along with CSF, so that it forms a cyst-like sac on the outer aspect of the skin, right? So you'll see a bulge on the outer aspect of the skin, on the surface of the skin, and this is a sac-like structure which contains the meninges and the CSF. But the neural tissue does not lie in the sac. Clear? So this is known as meningocele. Now you come to meningomyelocele. Now what happens in meningomyelocele? Same thing, you'll have a sac-like structure, okay, which is made up of the meninges containing the CSF. But here you will have the spinal cord. Okay, that is the neural tissue. The spinal cord is lying in the sac. Okay. So this condition is known as meningomyelocele, and such people in these severe forms of spina bifida, they will present with disabilities. Okay, and you have a very severe form which is known as a rachis-kyssis. So in rachis-kyssis, what happens? The neural plate, okay, the neural plate does not form the neural folds. Neural plate does not form the neural folds. It remains flat as a mass of tissue, where you can see labeled as neural tissue. Okay, so this condition is known as rachis-kyssis. So spinal cord is not formed at all, right? Okay, so this neural tissue can be either in the form of a plate or it may be folded, and this condition is known as rachis-kyssis, and it occurs because of the failure of the development of neural folds. Okay, neural folds do not form in the first place, right? So this is a very severe form of NTD. Okay. So this is spina bifida occulta. So you can see only the meninges, you can see only the vertebral arches, they fail to fuse, okay, meninges, the spinal cord all remain inside the vertebral canal, right? And the defect is covered by patch of hair. Now usually all these neural tube defects affecting the spinal region, they are most commonly seen in the lumbosacral region, right? So spina bifida occulta, these people are normal, they don't present any kind of disability. Okay. So here you can see the picture, meningocele. Now I hope it is clear. You can see an outpouching of the membrane containing the CSF, okay, because there is failure of the vertebral arches to fuse, but the spinal cord remains in the vertebral column, in the vertebral canal, right? Then in meningomyelocele, you will see a part of the spinal cord lying in the sac, membrane, in the meninges sac. So this condition is known as meningomyelocele. Okay, in syringomyelocele, you will have a cavity, a part of the cavity of the spinal cord, okay, which enters in the sac, right? That is the central canal of the spinal cord is lying in the sac. So this condition is known as syringomyelocele, right? And you have lastly the myelocele. So in myelocele, what happens? The spinal cord lies in the defect, okay, and the defect is not covered by skin. It is not covered by skin or by muscle. So the spinal cord and the neural tissue is exposed on the back. Okay, so this kind of, it will result in necrosis of the nervous tissue of the spinal cord. So this kind, it results in a very, very severe injury. And usually the fetus do not survive. Okay, and you have this last case here. So you can see the spina bifida with central cicatrix. So that means the nervous tissue is exposed here and there is scarring, okay, in this region of the nervous tissue. So usually these neural tube defects, that is your spina bifida, is often associated in the severe form of NTDs are often associated with hydrocephalus. Okay, so in 18 to 90% of severe NTDs, they are associated with hydrocephalus, and it is a result, and the cause is usually because of Arnold-Chiari malformation or Arnold-Chiari syndrome. So in Arnold-Chiari malformation, what happens is that the spinal cord, the developing spinal cord is firmly attached to the vertebral column. Right? So when the vertebral column elongates, okay, during embryonic life, okay, the spinal cord gets stretched since the spinal cord is firmly attached to the vertebral column. And since the spinal cord is does not grow as the same length as the vertebral column, okay, and it is firmly attached to the vertebral column. So when the vertebral column elongates, what happens? You know that your spinal cord is continuous above with the brain, with the developing brain, right? So as the vertebral column elongates, it will pull down the cerebellum. So the cerebellum, a part of the cerebellum is pulled down into the foramen magnum, towards the spinal cord. So this will block the flow of CSF into the subarachnoid space. Okay, and this will give rise to hydrocephalus. So you'll see that the fetus is born with a severe neural tube defect and also at the same time has a severely enlarged cranium, okay, which is known as hydrocephalus, right? So usually such fetuses again do not survive. They have a very poor prognosis. Now, how to prevent neural tube defects? So it has now decreased 70%, 50 to 70% by intake of folic acid or folate, that is vitamin B9, which is given to pregnant women. Now, this is mandatory. All pregnant women all over the world have now, they have to take folic acid or folate, vitamin B9 during their antenatal period, right? So women who may become pregnant 2 months before conception are advised to take 400 micrograms of folic acid daily. Okay, women who become pregnant are supposed to take 1 milligram of folic acid per day for the entire first trimester. Okay, so for the entire first trimester, they have to take the folic acid. And women who have previously given birth to a child with a neural tube defect or have a family history of neural tube defect are given 4 milligram or 5 milligram of folic acid daily for the first 3 months. So the treatment is you give folic acid or folate, okay, 2 months before pregnancy happens and continue it in the first trimester of pregnancy. Okay, you stop it at the end of the first trimester because neurulation is complete, neural tube has formed. So you do not need to continue with folic acid supplement, right? Okay, so that finishes my lecture. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.